Good morning, commissioners, leadership staff, and all staff and community members listening. We are now beginning the January 12th and 13th, 2021 Lane County Board of Commissioner meeting. Before we begin, I need to make a statement. The day after the inaugural meeting of this 2021 Lane County Board of Commissioners in our nation's capital, in the People's House, the citadel of our democracy, it was stormed by an angry mob of lawless criminals incited by our outgoing president to launch a calculated insurrection. It was violent. There were casualties. For God's sake, they even built a gallows and noose intended for elected representatives and our vice president. My second day as chair, I wrote a statement condemning the action. While I've received a few hate messages, I must share that the overwhelming majority of responses were of appreciation for simply telling the truth. To reiterate, this was a terrible, shameful example for our children and our grandchildren who were watching, as mine were. A free and fair election occurred 2 months ago. The results have withstood numerous recounts and court challenges. It is past time to accept the results and focus on the serious issues confronting us, just like this Board of Commissioners always does, with difficult decisions having competing interests and points of view. I hope we all, I know we all do, I hope we all feel blessed to live in a country constitutionally marching toward inclusion and freedom, regardless of one's ethnicity or the color of one's skin, regardless of the country of one's birth or how one worships their God, regardless of gender identification and preference, a march to freedom, regardless of age, economic status, political party, or point of view. A march to freedom and inclusion based on the content of one's character, one's heart, one's intent, and enlightenment on issues, where each person has a voice that has as much right to be heard as any other, and where we can listen and disagree without being hostile or combative, where we all of us place country and community and the democratic process above party or special interests. Ours is a nonpartisan board of commissioners. We will discuss and debate passionately, we will vote, and we will move on, which reflects maturity and accountability, and who we are as Americans. And in light of recent events, we will lead by example and never, ever accept or condone violence at any level of government. Thanks for listening. Now, let's get to work. Item number 1 on our agenda is adjustments to the agenda. Do commissioners have any adjustments to the agenda? Diana, I believe you had an item you wanted to bring up here.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I do. During the meeting last week on January 5th, we had an item to elect the vice chair. As I was recording making the record for the meeting, it appears as if we did not have an audible second for Commissioner Bozovich's motion of Commissioner Farr to be the vice chair. We have watched the video, we have watched and listened to it multiple times, and while it appears that 3 commissioners agree there was a second, as the recorder, I did not get an audible second. So at this time, I would like to ask Commissioner Farr to reaffirm that he did make a second, if that was his intention.
I was the seconder of the motion. That was my intention. And when the chair suggested there was a second to the motion, when we considered the motion, I presumed that it had been heard by all at the time. So yes, I was in fact the seconder.
Thank you. That's the only business I need to conclude. I will put you on record as being the second for that motion.
Is there any other comments or items under this item? Okay. Is there emergency business? Okay, so this is very interesting. You're muted, Mr. Mokrahysky.
Yeah.
But I just-
Sorry, we'll get our routine. Yeah, we'll get our routine down. I typically nod my head in these forums. I just shake my head no if we don't have any, but I'll just say no, we don't have any emergency business today.
Thank you. I apologize. At this time, we're on agenda item number 3, public comments. With this, I need to enter this in. With this virtual format, some housekeeping items to the public watching. You are currently registered in this meeting system as attendees. Attendees are webinar participants who are audience members viewing the meeting. Your microphone and webcam are automatically muted as attendees. There will be a time during the meeting, which we're about to enter into, which will be open for public comment. At that time, if you wish to participate in public comment, I will ask you to raise your virtual hand to be recognized. You should see a hand icon on the device you are using to watch the meeting. Press the hand icon only once to raise your hand. When the public comment begins, our meeting organizer will call names. When your name is called, you will be unmuted and given 3 minutes to make your public comment. When your 3 minutes are up, you will return to muted status and the next name will be called. You can then continue to watch the webinar as long as you choose. The intent is that everyone wishing to make public comments has the opportunity, but please note, if there are more people wishing to speak than we have time allotted, I may need to either limit the number of speakers and or reduce the time allotted per speaker. Speakers will then be selected randomly to participate in public comment. We don't anticipate that will occur, but if it does, that's how it will be handled. Diana, is there anyone wishing to make a public comment?
Thank you, Chair Barney. At this time, we do not have anyone signed up for public comment, so I will return the meeting to you.
Okay. In that there was no public comment to respond to, do commissioners have any other statements that they otherwise would make at this time? Commissioner Buck.
I have 2 items I wanted to speak on in remonstrance. First was, as Chair, you mentioned, you signed on and some additional mayors signed on to a letter right after our meeting and the incident at the U.S. Capitol. Last night at the Cottage Grove State of the City address, it was mentioned as well from the mayor who did sign on to that letter, and subsequently their entire council approved to sign on to that letter as well. So I think that's the first city to do that, and I just wanted to commend them for doing so. I think that was a big statement to their community, and I appreciated that very much. The second item I wanted to address was what we just spoke about in the adjustments to the agenda regarding the vote for vice chair last week. I feel we had a failure by council. He wasn't paying attention, and when asked for assistance, he asked or mentioned that he didn't have his Roberts rules with him. The assistance that was needed by the chair was very elementary. He should have been prepared. He was not prepared. And I think that caused a great deal of confusion after the vote and subsequently after our meeting. That was completely and utterly unnecessary. It was a bad way to start out the year, and it was not a good example for the public or a new commissioner on board as to how we should be doing business on our board. I am losing confidence in our county council. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other commissioners that would like to speak at this point in the agenda? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. I have two things. The first, yesterday, the Confederated Tribes of Lower Umpqua Siuslaw had their Board of Trustees meeting to select successful grant applicants. And Commissioner Bozovich and I serve as trustees on the board of the tribes. And yesterday we distributed a little over $200,000, so we made decisions on distribution of a little over $200,000, predominantly to nonprofit organizations and predominantly in Lane, Douglas, Coos, Curry, and Lincoln counties. It was a pretty interesting meeting where we had about 200 applicants and we ultimately distributed, I believe the number is about 48 grants, averaging someplace close to, well, do the math on it, averaging a little over $2,000, I guess, per grant. So it's something we do every single year. It's not the only granting organization, but it's an example of partnership in supporting our nonprofits in our our county and adjacent counties. So good work to the Confederated Tribes. The second is something on a very personal note. Today is a very big day for me and for my family. My father was born 101 years ago today in Newcastle, England. Now, my dad was one of the bravest men on earth, and his mother, Elizabeth Kilkenny, was the most powerful woman that I ever met in my entire life. Today, my father suffered through the Depression, endured through the war years when he built Spitfire engines, served in the Royal Navy, worked in a forge for 25 years, and brought us all to America in 1965. I'm an immigrant. I'm from an immigrant family. We moved to Tillamook County in 1965. My father went to work changing tires at Tillamook Farmers Co-op. And some of those tires are pretty big, as you can well imagine. They're rear tires on tractors. Within a couple of years, he became the general manager of Tillamook Farmers Co-op, where he stayed for about 20 years. Very proud of my father, very proud of my heritage, very proud to be a naturalized citizen of the United States. Thank you, Chair.
No other commissioners at this time? Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I had intended to speak only to one topic, but I will briefly address a second, just to amplify Commissioner Buck's comments. I will say that I followed up directly with County Council, asking for a very specific piece of information. I'm still waiting for that, which is the timestamp at which the second was made and acknowledged. And so I want to make very clear, I am in no way disputing the outcome of the election. That is not what's in question. What's in question for me is the integrity of the process and of the support that we as a commission received. And unless and until I can be given that timestamp and review for myself the tape, which I have watched several times and sent him my observations based on the real time and reviewing the tape multiple times, the timestamps at which I saw various pieces of the process unfold, I have yet to see where exactly that happened in the meeting. And so I appreciate Commissioner Buck's comments and amplify them. What I wanted to speak to, what I was prepared to speak to in advance, is to recognize, as Chair Bernie started us out with, the events of last Wednesday, appreciating the many comments and statements elected officials all over our community, our state, our region, and our country have made about it, abhorring the violence, the disruption. I want to point out that the implications and the actions of this insurrection was not limited to Washington, D.C. There was a coordinated national effort. State capitals across this country were scenes of rallies and hateful rhetoric, including here in Oregon in our own Salem, state capital in Salem. I want to bring to the fore the unmistakable undercurrent of the fact that this insurrectionist movement has its roots in and is a reflection of this country's history of racism and white supremacy. There were Confederate flags being paraded around Senate chambers inside our nation's capital, Nazi symbols, hats and t-shirts mocking those perished in concentration camps, including many of my ancestors. To end this, we have to name it for what it is. We have to understand its roots. We have to own up to our complicity in it and our responsibility to work to end it. I want to also acknowledge that for each of us who are expressing our fear and concern, we have to recognize that for the Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our community, our colleagues in this organization, our family members, their trauma was greatly magnified relative to ours on that day. The good news is that we've already begun taking explicit steps along the path to a more just Lane County. I spent some time over the weekend carefully reviewing resolutions that this board, before I joined, passed condemning white nationalism, as well as supporting the Black Lives Matter movement and committing to our equity work. And I believe this organization's got the ability to deliver on the content of those resolutions. We have vision, we have the people, we have many of the tools in place, but we have to stay vigilant and committed to that work. We have to understand that there is a through line of these issues in every conversation we have and every policy that we have the opportunity to weigh in on. And so I want to close by thanking this board for adopting those resolutions and laying the groundwork for that work. And I want to especially thank our staff, particularly those from communities of color, for the hard work that they do every day, despite the risks and threats that they face. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bozievich. We cannot hear you, Commissioner.
Apologies. Thank you, Chair. I issued personal statements after last Wednesday condemning the violence, but at the same time, I have been continually condemning violence in political protests over the last year plus. Having been targeted personally with threats of violence to the point where the FBI investigated them, I strongly condemn any use of violence in political action. In fact, as part of my libertarian roots, I believe in the non-initiation of force. It's never correct. What I'm concerned about is suddenly this is being condemned and this idea is being condemned. As we watched in Portland, as law enforcement officers were specifically targeted for harm, piles of bricks were hidden in trash cans so they could be hurled at law enforcement officers. Commercial grade fireworks were aimed and fired at them from mortars. Lasers were pointed in their eyes in attempts to blind them. Yet we did not see clear condemnation of those actions in the past. And we had political violence right here in Lane County, intended to silence somebody that had spoken up on a controversial issue, when during one of the nights of unrest, Elkhorn Brewery was specifically targeted. After that night, I called for local public officials to condemn that act in the attempt to silence political speech. I was the only local politician that spoke out at that time. We have been tolerating an increasing level of violence relative to politics in this country. And we should have been speaking out this strongly months ago, years ago. What we saw in Washington, D.C. was basically the culmination of a tolerance of violence connected with political protest. It should never be tolerated, no matter who's upset, what the cause is. It's wrong. I condemned last Wednesday's actions. I condemned the attack on Elkhorn Brewery. I condemn the attacks on the police in Portland. Speaking of nationally coordinated, that seemed to be a fairly nationally coordinated effort over the summer to attack police. So I would just ask that as folks condemn this, that they include all political violence in their condemnation. Not just Washington, D.C., Portland, Eugene, Seattle. We need to condemn it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Chair Bernie. My heart is hurting right now on a number of issues, that specifically right here at home and right here in this building. We're beginning the year on a bad step. Last week we elected the vice chair. I seconded the motion. Nobody heard me second the motion. You called for the second, Chair Bernie, and nobody disputed that there was a second, so I presumed it was. It's not good form to second a motion for your own name. It's not. And that being said, it was a split vote. As a Board of County Commissioners, we know the work in front of us. We know the uphill climb that we have to be able to complete the work that's in front of us and the work as it comes down the road. We have to work completely together, and to start the year on a dispute. I don't. It's not a good way to start the year. And Chair Bernie, your first meeting as a chair, we loosely follow Robert's Rules of Order. That's what's stated regarding our operation. And Chair Bernie, you're doing a superb job of handling Robert's Rules of Order as have been outlined, as we've historically done them. But that being said, I don't want to start the year on this dispute on division. We voted for the chair, and it was a unanimous vote. It was a split vote for the vice chair. That's not a good thing, and it's not a good thing that we have two commissioners who are questioning whether or not we have a actual, I guess maybe a legal vote. I don't know. We're looking for a timestamp on the second. At this point, I think the best thing for us to do is to reconsider the vote. And if somebody were to make a motion to reconsider the vote, somebody on the prevailing side were to make a motion to reconsider the vote, I will second that motion and forward it to a second vote regarding the vice chair. Now, Chair Bernie, you can make a determination whether or not we do that now, or whether we do it later on in the meeting, or whether it doesn't happen at all. Once again, I will second the motion should somebody make such a motion. I don't want to serve as a vice chair on a divided commission. There was a discussion that I tried to have last week. We can't be divided on the things that we have to work on. We cannot do that. We need consolidation. And to begin the year like this, it gets me right here. Gets me right here.
You have no idea how hard it is for me to control my desire to talk, but I've been told as chair first. Again, Ms. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. And thank you, Commissioner Farr. I just feel like I absolutely have to restate my objections are not to the outcome of that election for vice chair to this board. I don't dispute it. And Commissioner Farr, immediately on the heels of that, the duration of the remainder of last week, you and I have had several conversations, moving right along, working together, having conversations about the issues faced by this community. I do not wish to spend time, and I certainly don't want there to be any misunderstanding that I'm questioning the outcome of the vote, my willingness to serve with you as our vice chair and to work collaboratively and cooperatively and respectfully with you. My concern is about the integrity of the process. The only public record that we have that I can stand by is the recording of the meeting. I've watched it several times. I've sent my time-stamped what I observed to our county council asking for clarification, and I have not received an adequate response. My concern is about the integrity of the process. My concern is about the public reviewing and not being able to see for themselves, as I wasn't able to see, and I was there, a clear and concise an absolute process. So I am not objecting to or contesting or needing to retake the vote. I'm asking that this body, with the support of our county council, create better, clearer protocols so that this doesn't happen again. And I don't know, because that is not my area of expertise, how we need to handle creating a proper record and minutes recording of a meeting in which a vote was taken, where it is not evident to all that the proper process was followed. My concerns are completely and 100% with the procedure, not with the outcome. Thank you.
Okay, we have, Commissioner Bozovich, we have so much to do. If you could be concise, sir, please.
I will attempt to be very concise. I will just say that our elections for chair and vice chair have been messy ever since the Dundee decision, because we can't pre-discuss who's going to run for chair and vice chair amongst the quorum. If you go back and watch previous first of the year board meetings, you will see lots of hemming and hawing in seconds, and we've even had split votes in the past. So don't think this is an unusual occurrence, because we can't predetermine who's going to be chair and vice chair. It's not legal. Secondly, the chair went on with the vote, which means he accepted that there was a second. It's not for our county council to determine that. Under Robert's rules, the fact that there was no objection at that time during the meeting to the fact that they felt there wasn't a second, and the chair moved on with that nominee as if there was a second, that's the way the meeting is decided. Having been a parliamentarian in student council all through junior high and high school, one of the reasons why I stopped the process earlier, because we were completely off of it when we started to vote separately on the two nominations, because I have that parliamentary experience. The chair basically accepted that there was a second. There was no objections to that at the time. That's the chair's determination, and took the vote as if there was a second. So I don't know why we're looking to county council to tell us there was a second.
Okay, this has been a very lively remonstrance to no public input. But let me just tell you what I am concluding. One, what I heard from Commissioner Trieger, and my experience with my vast experience of a week with her thus far, is she is not challenging this. We are unified moving forward. What I have heard from Commissioner Bozovich is that there is no disagreement that none of us condone violence at any level of government. It's just a matter of what was the event that prompted us to coalesce and to take that stand strongly. And if an insurrection at our nation's capital is not enough of an event to finally get us to do that, regardless of where it occurs, we are here now. So I have a sense that we are a unified board. I would like to say that it was exceedingly awkward for me in my first minute. Mind you, I had just given past Chair Buck a plaque, and in my first minute, we voted on vice chair, and it was confusing. And I asked our administrator for assistance. I asked county council for assistance. Had I known that Commissioner Bozovich had a vast parliamentarian high school experience, I would have asked him for assistance. And the fact of the matter was, there was no clear direction. And I do ultimately have to always go to county council for that clear direction when these kinds of things occur. So it was awkward. People weren't prepared. We're moving beyond it now. I see this as an incredibly unified board, given the events of the last week. I would also like to state that it is high time, I agree with Commissioner Bozovich, that we consistently do not condone violence, because as we speak, violence is being planned for all 50 state capitals, as well as the inauguration. We are in an unparalleled moment in our history, and I thank God that this Board of Commissioners actually, when we get past some of the issues, are together on those absolutely critical, fundamental democratic processes. I am going to move to county administration. We have a lot of work to do over the next 2 days. The monthly holiday farm fire update, Mr. Mokrahysky, and I believe Mr. Hurley.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll turn it over to Dan to provide the update.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. It's been a few weeks since we've had an update on this topic as we switch to a monthly update with this. The big news to report is that we have hired a long-term disaster recovery manager. I appreciate the board in funding this as a full-time position to lead this effort over the next 2 years. And our hire is Matt McCrae. He is coming from the Oregon Children's Trust, where he's been for the last 4 years. Prior to that, he worked in several positions at the city of Eugene and has a strong track record for working with groups, working through complex processes. He's a great communicator. He led the city's first climate action plan, which was a very challenging process involving multiple groups, and was able to get through that in 12 months and get that to a unanimous vote by the council. So I think that speaks to his skills that he'll bring to this position. So we're excited to bring him on. He also has quite a bit of experience in emergency management and natural hazards. He worked through an update of the city's natural hazard mitigation plan, which included an update to the hazards vulnerability assessment. So he has a track record for great work, and we're excited to have him on board. And he will start 2 weeks from yesterday. So by the time we do our next update, he will be on board, and I'll be working with him to set up a more formal briefing now that we're doing this once a month with slides and some metrics as requested by the chair. So just moving through some of our regular updates on this topic. On public engagement, our PIO, Devin Ashbridge, is still doing a terrific job. Communication is definitely a challenge with this, with so many displaced persons and challenges up the valley with connectivity. But we're continuing to put out a weekly electronic newsletter with various updates on deadlines and updates about all the different things that are happening with this recovery effort. We also are doing a bi-weekly Facebook Live event, and our next one is this Thursday at noon. People can tune in, and we generally have different program leaders and experts that are highlighted differently with each update as those come along. On social services, Lucy Zamorelli and Laurel O'Rourke are doing terrific work out there. Laurel is leading our MAST effort. That's our multi-agency shelter transition team. And this is an intensive effort where we're working with individuals to try to get at their needs, to try to get them to qualify for assistance. And I think your board materials say 49. I think that's actually about 35 people. It's a slow process. These are the most difficult cases. You know, sometimes there are mental health issues. Sometimes people were pre-homeless before the disaster. But Laura's really working, knowing the different connections in the agency, the different resources to get people on a path for success as they continue with their individual recovery. Lucy's leading the way with our long-term recovery group. And we have a formalized structure for this now and an agency that's taking that on. And in your packet, there is a diagram showing what the long-term recovery group will look like. That's being led by our COAD, the Lane County COAD. That's our Community Organizations Aiding in Disaster. They will provide the umbrella for this structure. And then within that, there will be 7 different subcommittees. There's a housing and construction committee. I'm currently working with Land Management Division right now to identify the stakeholders and start pulling that one together. There's a disaster case management committee that includes that MAST effort, donations committee, an unmet needs committee, a volunteer committee, a healthcare committee, and a spiritual care committee. And a couple of those last 2 we're still working on getting set up. We're focusing primarily on the unmet needs committee and our disaster case management committee at the moment. But a lot of partners coming together on that, and really appreciate the COAD giving leadership in conjunction with United Way, providing the financial umbrella for this recovery group. So the idea of this is that we would step up this long-term recovery group. This is sort of FEMA's model where the community takes ownership over the long-term recovery, and government sort of steps away in sort of a more supportive role to let the community guide the recovery effort. Excited to see that moving forward. On On the housing effort, not a whole lot of change there. We submitted our appeal to FEMA when we were rejected for a direct housing mission. We have not received a response back from that yet. We are working with various partners in the community to look at different housing alternatives for folks, but those have been primarily focused on Eugene Springfield area. There's potential for the county to purchase a hotel through the Project Turnkey statewide effort. Homes for Good is also looking at some options. They're planning to bring on 2 subsidized housing projects in early spring, and our wildfire victims can be prioritized for placement into those. And also they're looking at purchasing the Lazy Days mobile home park that was burned upriver and potentially putting some housing solutions on that. So lots of things in the works there. We're also working through our public assistance reimbursement process with FEMA. Patience Winningham is working through that with our liaison there to make sure that we have everything accounted for, and we're trying to get our maximum reimbursement that we can get there. We've been working through with eWeb to make sure that they can get reimbursement as well, and we will be adding their expenses for the hazardous waste removal and some of the erosion control measures that they took early on into our assistance reimbursement, and they'll be putting it into theirs as well, just to make sure they're covered one way or another. We've also engaged with the governor's office. Austin Ramirez is leading that effort for bringing on Oregon Solutions to help the community through their recovery. And we're working on an assessment form that different community entities can fill out to help them prepare for their work as they start their engagement process. One big change is with the housing in hotels. We still have, actually we had a little bump over the holidays, about 183 people in hotels still. The state has taken over that mission from the Red Cross. We haven't received an update for a few weeks, but we'll get you some updated numbers there. But hear that's going well. They're working with a caterer, which I'd like to highlight at our next meeting, who's doing a terrific job bringing in 3 meals a day to support those folks that are having to remain in hotels, as difficult as that may be for months after months. On the debris management work, Jeff Bishop's leading that work. It's coming together well. They've started moving through the removal of hazard trees. A contractor has working for ODOT, and we're just about to start onto the step 2, our phase 2 debris removal process, which is going to be removing the large debris. Working with ODOT right now to formalize an MOU with the landfill so that we can receive that waste to make sure we're not overwhelmed with that material that's going to start coming in at a fast pace. On the Watershed Task Force, eWeb is leading some great work there. They're developing some landowner incentive programs to promote smart rebuilding, to encourage septic upgrades, and to move and encourage rebuilding farther away from the river. The restoration team is working on lots of efforts on erosion control treatments, and their GIS data management team has stepped up a new app for quick capturing hazard reporting for all the different partners that are working up there, so that they can quickly share information about fallen trees or slides. And as we move into this weather event over the next 24 hours, this could be pretty important. We do want to encourage people to, pay attention to what we put out prior about slide risks. We have a map on our website. So all our information is at mckenzierebuilds.org. There's a map there that shows areas of severe slide risk. And as we move into this weather event where we're looking at potentially up to 4 inches of rain over the next 24 hours in certain areas, there's an elevated risk there. So people should make sure they're staying out of those areas and staying safe. That concludes my updates for you, unless you have questions. And again, we'll have a more thorough update next month with Matt on board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurley. It is Herculean, all of the efforts daily that you're overseeing. I'm sure there are questions, comments that commissioners would like to make. I saw Commissioner Buck's hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I am happy to hear that the process has started with Oregon Solutions. It was a pleasure to help bring Carmen Ford, the Director of Oregon Solutions, down here to help facilitate a potential of the Holiday Farm Fire in the McKenzie region as a state project for them. They do have to do due diligence, which is technically like a 30 to 90-day period, and then pitch it to the governor to see if this is a project they'd be willing to allocate resources to. I'm very hopeful for that, and thankful to Ms. Ford for being willing to entertain this idea. The other thing is I've been fielding a lot of questions about internet service. There have been getting some internet reconnectivity. There are some big gaps. Mr. Hurley, would you be able to expand on that a little bit?
Commissioner Buck, actually, I don't have a lot of information on that. Patience Winningham has been tracking that more closely than I. With all the different things, we've kind of divided and conquered on some things. And that's one that I just haven't followed very well. I apologize. I would probably be misspeaking if I tried getting an update, but I would be happy to get an update and email that out to the board.
That would be great, just for the public. I do know that Spectrum has been working quite diligently. A couple of other providers come on and off as power gets reconnected as well. But I am keeping a pulse on that as there's still a lot of work to do.
Other commissioners? I see no other. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Farr. We cannot hear you, Commissioner.
Sorry, Mr. Hurley, thanks. You've responded quite often to my questions regarding types of housing that are going to be available, including, mobile temporary housing that can be used for transitional housing. And I talked a number of times about the concern I have for people whose addresses were not of record in the Holiday Fire area. And those people include folks who are living perhaps in a camper on the back of somebody's property, unregistered, unsanctioned, but probably not legal by Oregon land use laws, but still addresses homes where people were living. And I remain concerned about not just the people who had registered addresses in the McKenzie Valley, but people who lived there who did not have registered addresses, who by and large have no means of compensation or recompense for their losses, or any security that they're going to actually have a place to live. And I don't know that there's much you can say about it at this point, Mr. Hurley, but it remains high on my list of interests, as I've said, and I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one with that high on the list of interests. It looks like you need to say something, so I'll stop talking for a moment.
I just would respond to that. That is one of our concerns as well, Vice Chair Farr. There were a lot of people living in sort of non-traditional housing up there, and that's why I think we still have quite a large population in the hotels. So we will be looking at ways to try to get people into some of those alternative housing as a rebuild. So I've asked Land Management Division to work on some communications to clarify the process for some of those, for siting RVs and for siting tiny homes. So we're working on some of that. Also working to clarify, the state has loosened their rules on what can be allowed for temporary housing. For example, on some parcels, you can have up to 3 yurts or 3 RVs there for a period of time. And it's quite complex based on the zoning. So I want to make sure that I bring that to you in a formal way that summarizes that. And we'll get that information out on our website. We've done a lot of work to clarify the process for permitting and rebuilding for folks. So from our website there are links where people can do a quick search on what permits have been issued for their parcel and where they are in the permitting process if they've applied for a new permit. Very much clearer, and I think that's going to benefit not only just for the rebuild, but for communications around land management issues in general. And then the third piece, with that long-term recovery group, I think that's going to be a big benefit too once we get that housing and construction committee going. that I'm hoping that there will be some focus there around tiny homes and other alternative structures. So we'll be working through that with the long-term recovery group.
Thank you for that wonderful response, Mr. Hurley. I know staff is working on it. And while I direct my questions predominantly to you or to Mr. Mokrahajski, I know that Laurel O'Rourke and Lucy Zamarelli and Austin Ramirez and others are superstars working day and night to get things accomplished. One other thing that I will point out, beyond the people we know who were living on properties, who did not have addresses, who have some means to address, we also know that we have a large number of people, many of them are veterans, who live off the grid, quite often in wooded areas. And we have no way to know quite often how many or who they are. So I think we need to be particularly vigilant in looking for and hearing about men and or women who were living off the grid in the burned area. And it's something that we need to pay attention to at all times, but particularly right now, be very vigilant as to and looking for people who were in that situation, who quite often are reluctant to even acknowledge that they exist, let alone need assistance. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Hurley, thank you very much.
Other commissioners? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Hurley, for sharing the county's response to one of the unbelievable issues affecting us all at this moment in time. County administration, item 5B, COVID-19 response and recovery. We have Mr. Mokrahajski and Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm just going to make some comments to tee up this update for you, particularly around vaccinations. I wanted to start by just acknowledging the continued great work of our dedicated team of public servants who have been working on response to COVID-19 in our community for the better part of a year. I also want to just pause and reflect that yesterday we hit crossed the threshold of 100 deaths in Lane County. We today reported an additional 3 deaths, so we're now at 103, but it's a moment for us to just, I think, pause and reflect on the fact that now over 100 lives have been lost to this disease in our community. And that impacts families and friends and neighbors and coworkers and so many people in our community, as it has across the state and the nation. And so, as we've said in our outreach to employees and to the community, our thoughts and condolences are with those who've been directly affected by people who've been ill and who have died as a result of this disease. And we reaffirm our commitment to those really important public health measures of wearing a mask, keeping social distance, washing our hands, and not attending large gatherings outside of our people within our household. And so as we work on the rollout of the vaccination that is happening, I just wanted to sort of set the stage. And I know the board, and some of this may be redundant, but we're really working on creating clarity and reinforcing clarity around what this vaccination process looks like. There's confusion nationally across the state and in our local community about who's doing what and where the vaccines and who has the vaccines and when am I going to get my shot. So just very basically, and Steve Adams may reiterate some of these things, if you're like me, you need to hear things more than once before it sinks in. So please forgive us if it sounds like we're being redundant, but it's really just to make sure that the information we have available is resonating with folks. And of course, the information and this process is changing very rapidly. So very basically, I'll say that the role of the federal government as it relates to the vaccines is to distribute the vaccines through the CDC to states. The role of the state governments is to establish, with some guidance from the CDC, the priorities, what the sequencing of phases are going to be, who is going to receive the vaccine within what phases, what the priorities are going to be, and then to distribute those vaccines to local communities, to counties, based on the process that they've defined. So you do see some variation in how this is handled state by state, because each state has sort of developing some different priorities. And you'll see in a state like Florida where they're having a process that looks very different than the process that we have here in Oregon. Now, we do have some news that's come out today from the federal government about the expected release of additional vaccines that they have available to them, the second dose vaccines. So we do expect that in coming weeks, we're going to see potentially an influx of additional vaccines to the state of Oregon than what they have received to date. The state of Oregon has received about 30,000 doses per week. If you just think about that from a population standpoint, Lane County is approximately 10% of the state population. So if we just looked at how much Lane County could expect to receive, 10% of 30,000 is 3,000 doses per week. If you do the math on that very simply, it doesn't take long to figure out that it would take several years to actually vaccinate the adult population in Lane County if we only received 3,000 doses. And that's about what we've received. So in Lane County, and Steve can update this, but the numbers I had was about 7,300 people have received at least a first dose vaccination in Lane County. So 387,000 total population. The adult population is something less than that. 7,300 people have received at least a first dose vaccination. We know that we have the capacity to a 12-person team that's trained to administer vaccines has the capacity to do 1,600 doses per day. So 12 people can do 1,600 doses per day. We're working in one scenario to ramp up for a larger scale event in Lane County. That if the state delivers those doses to us, the supply to us, that we could have a 6 teams of 12 people each administering those doses would do 9,600 doses per day. So I'm giving you a hypothetical situation that we have capacity. We have teams not only in Lane County, but in McKenzie-Willamette, at Peace Health, in private clinics, at the U of O, at our K-12 schools, at pharmacies, all have the capacity to do this. We're building plans, and Steve will talk more about what some of those plans look like for where these things can be held. Right now, we're in, as we know, the state has defined these phases. Phase 1A, 4 groups in that phase, focused on healthcare workers, long-term care facilities, EMS workers. Education sector has been moved to phase 1B. So they'll be the first group in phase 1B. Phase 1B is essential workers. We're still waiting for the state to provide clarity around who's going to be in the essential worker category. So again, some of these things are changing. There may be even some new guidance from the federal government around folks over 65 may be advanced there. So the role of the federal and state government is really to distribute, they're the supply. They're providing the supply of vaccines. The challenge, and then the role of local agencies, so it's local public health agencies like Lane County Public Health, as well as hospitals like Peace Health and McKenzie-Willamette, private clinics like Nova, private pharmacies, and others. So it's really a community-wide effort to vaccinate people in our community. And we are working in partnership with all those folks. Exciting news that's happening with the new software program that the U of O has developed that Steve will touch on. I just wanted to provide a kind of basically what we've done so far, focused on what the state has defined as our priority groups in healthcare, long-term care, and EMS. I didn't mention Eugene Springfield Fire. They've also received several doses of vaccine and are inoculating folks in the EMS and public safety and congregate settings. So the crux of the challenge right now is not our capacity to administer at the local level. It is the supply chain distribution from the federal and state government. Frankly, the state is just not receiving the 30,000 a week. It's not meeting what the demand is. We know that we have approximately 26,000 people in Lane County that fall in healthcare, just in healthcare workers, which is just one component of the 1A category. Statewide, I'll just say 99,620 people in Oregon have received a vaccine so far. So 7,300 in Lane County, 99,000 statewide. So a little bit less than our population. The vaccines that we've received in Lane County, Peace Health, McKenzie-Willamette, Eugene Springfield Fire, Lane County Public Health, those are being administered. They're not sitting in on shelves. We're not waiting for anything. They are being administered as quickly as we receive them. So I think that's everything that I just wanted to hit. Again, I welcome Steve to either correct me or to reiterate all of those things, because we really want to work on creating that capacity. We're working with the state, and we're hopeful that we're going to get a mass vax event here in the coming days or weeks, focused on that first group. We're following the state and federal guidance around those priority groups. We're ready to administer, and our teams here in Lane County and our partners in the community are doing incredible work to get those vaccines in the arms of our residents. The challenge right now is getting that vaccine delivered here to our local community. I want to thank the board, because yesterday several commissioners were helpful in contacting state officials, the governor's office and OHA and others. We received news that we had requested well over 1,000 doses just to Lane County Public Health for this week, and we were told we were only going to get 100. Good news is we're told now we're going to get a little bit more than that. So that's really positive. And we also got contact from OHA that they are talking to us about a larger scale event here in Lane County. So that's all positive movement. We want to keep that advocacy going, and we want to keep advocating to the state government as well as to the feds to deliver those. So that's a lot there to unpack. And Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you to provide some additional detail and clarity.
Steve, if I may, I'm sorry. Steve Mokrahysky, a little more than 100? What's a little more than 100 that you expect?
Yeah, Steve will. I know the number that I have, but I want Steve to give you what I know is going to be the most updated and accurate number. So Steve will give you that.
I apologize. Go ahead, Steve.
I see Commissioner Trieger had her hand up just before.
I apologize. Commissioner Trieger, go ahead, and then we'll let Steve speak, and then the rest of us can ask our questions. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you. Very brief. I just didn't want to lose it. Steve Mokrahysky, you said a number of healthcare workers in Lane County, a number of people that meet that 1A classification. Can you just repeat that number? And if you know how sure we are that the 7,300 doses that have been in arms are people in that category, or
yeah. It's approximately 20. Again, Steve Adams can correct me. Approximately 26,000. We estimate 26,000 healthcare workers. So I believe like EMS and long-term care facility are outside of that number. So actually, the number of folks in 1A is greater than 26,000, we believe. But we believe that the healthcare number, just the healthcare community, is about 26,000. I have a high degree of confidence in the 7,300 that have been administered, that the priority has been, it's been Peace Health, McKenzie-Willamette, Eugene Springfield Fire, and Lane County Public Health have been the four, and a few others, but the four primary agencies that have received those 7,300 vaccines that have administered them to healthcare workers. But Steve can dive deeper into that.
Mr. Adams, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Bernie, and thank you, Steve, for the setup. I'm just confirming, Chair Bernie, that you can see my slide.
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so very keen, obviously, to focus on vaccine issues, but I do want to begin just with the kind of state of disease prevalence within Lane County. I would note that this week marks the conclusion of my first month on the team here, and it's been a heck of a month. I just really want to take the moment to express gratitude to Steve and to Karen and to the rest of the team here for all they've done to help bring me into the process and get me up to speed. So as Steve noted, and this EpiCurve is current as of last evening. We have gotten some new reports. We're showing 101 new cases this morning beyond this particular number that you're seeing on this slide. And we've had an additional 3 deaths reported in the last 24 hours. So that brings us to 103 for the duration of the pandemic. We continue to have concern about the prevalence of disease, and what we really and truly are anticipating to be an increase in cases over the next several weeks. Our case investigations team put their finger on the first New Year's Eve party as they began to trace contacts. So we have identified that as an event. We know that we will continue to see cases creep up. So as vaccine is coming in, it is incredibly important that we remain diligent with respect to our efforts to socially distance, to wear masks, to continue to have good hand hygiene. And we have to recognize that the vaccine numbers really will not impact all of these metrics that we are really focused on: the number of folk in hospitals, the number of folk suffering from severe disease, and the number of folks, sadly, who succumb to COVID-19 with a very high prevalence of disease in the general population here. So just reminding you where we are with respect to Lane County in the updated COVID-19 disease metrics for individual counties. We were designated as extreme risk. We received our data from OHA in the movement week last week, and this week, or in the warning week, and we're in the movement week this week. We have yet to see what the latest update is from OHA that is coming to us today. We do not anticipate that we will be moving out of the extreme risk category. And you'll see that the metric of concern for Lane County is the 250 cases per 100,000 over the last 14 days. And while we have seen kind of some bumpy numbers due largely to the data issues and the slowdown in testing and test reporting over the holidays, we're beginning to see some flow of cases, and we do not anticipate that our case count per 100,000 is likely to get below the 200 mark, though it has been trending in a favorable direction. So with that, just little prelude or interlude on the state of disease, COVID-19, it remains a critical issue within the community. I want to really pivot and focus my briefing for you this morning on vaccine. As you know, and as we have presented, this phase 1, phase 2 is the current construct as we understand it within the state of Oregon following the governor's updates. As I presented this to you last week, I noted to you that we were receiving updates on a very, very frequent basis. And even within not even an hour of concluding my briefing for you last week, we received updated guidance from OHA. Late morning last Tuesday, which indicated a relaxation amongst the group 1, 2, 3, and 4 populations within the state of Oregon, largely driven by concerns that a strict sequencing protocol would slow the delivery of vaccine. Amended guidance was amended yet again later that afternoon, approximately 4 p.m. And then in subsequent phone calls with OHA staff, really trying to understand how serious were they in the relaxation. There was a desire to try to continue to respect the grouping to the greatest extent possible. But by later in the week, obviously, the guidance was go as fast as you can and get all of phase 1A together. There was some questions previously about numbers. So the healthcare estimates. So OHA did provide us with a number of population estimates last week from various sources cobbled together. And again, these are estimates. So the number of healthcare workers for Lane County is 26,971. And they provided breakouts. For instance, there's 929 pharmacists, according to one particular data set. The other update from my briefing to you last week really came in on Friday with the governor's press briefing. So on Thursday of last week, the governor's vaccine advisory team met to begin to provide recommendations about future phase sequencing, specifically beginning with phase 1B. They're working through a whole host of issues. The kind of most definitive thing out of that Thursday meeting was, what the governor announced on Friday at her press conference was that educators will be at the top of the line. So we do not yet know what the additional sequencing or identification of essential workers will be in the kind of detailed guidance that we get as we move forward. But this slide represents what we know at this point. Steve also noted that Secretary Azar, and I've been checking my news feed, was due to speak an hour ago regarding two very significant changes at the federal level. So one was an update in federal guidance to include individuals 65 years and greater into the prioritization process. And secondly, that the Trump administration, having heard that the Biden administration intends to release all of the kind of second dose allocations that have been sequestered at the federal level, the Trump administration is planning to surge that out to the states. So I'm telling you what I'm reading in the New York Times just coming into this briefing, but it looks like that surging may happen over the next couple of weeks. That is, if we were to look at some of the population estimates that we've been presented, the 65 and older population within Wayne County is approximately 50,000 individuals of our total of 378,000 residents. So that certainly adds to the number of folk who potentially could be funneling into the queue. And it's important to note that the federal advisory is purely that, it's advisory. It's up to the 50 governors to set the specific allocations and priorities. And so Governor Brown and OHA will have to take this new guidance update into account. They will issue guidance to us, and we're bound to follow the guidance as they move forward. Obviously, the concern of increasing the number of folk eligible at any given point in time, the constraining factor is indeed the number of doses available. So the analytics team within the EOC has been working to develop some new reports to kind of match some of what you've become accustomed to seeing in our incident updates. While some of those reports took a little bit of time to build earlier in the pandemic, we're very rapidly trying to replicate what we can provide to you in real time. So the process that the Oregon Health Authority has established and it is to call for individual locations to register via the statewide alert database, and this is the alert system is what we use to track every immunization for every Oregonian from these COVID-19 immunizations to measles, mumps, and rubella as well. So what this graphic is showing you, the map is showing you in blue the number of, and these data are current as of last week, that we had 36 providers registered within Wayne County, and then 12 of those providers had received specific allocations. So the table below the map shows the allocations received cumulatively by each of the recipients, and you see that as of last week's delivery, we have received in the county 4,100 doses of Moderna, 10,725 doses of Pfizer. So yesterday we received the email with the allocations for the week forward. So what the deliveries will be. We were advised that Wayne County recipients will be receiving 4,875 new Pfizer doses and another 1,400 Moderna doses coming in here. So we were very keen to, of course, with the news that as we dug into the details that Lane County Public Health was only receiving 100 of those doses, we began a process, obviously, of really engaging with OHA vigorously to try to understand the decision-making behind that. We submitted documentation last week indicating that Lane County Public Health could move 2,400 doses, no problem. We were told verbally that they would pencil us in at 15. So when we got the 100 allocation, we were quite perplexed. In multiple conversations, we heard a number of different rationales as to why we were receiving only 100. One was, we had received larger allocations in the past, and they were catching up other counties, and then it would all wash in the end. We heard another instance in which we failed to make our request in a timely fashion, which we went back and double checked, and that was not the case. So the analytics team has indeed begun developing a tracking tool. So since vaccines began shipping during the week of December 20th rather, we've since received allocations in this fashion. So this shows you the total weekly shipment on the data points. The week of January 3rd, we did not receive any Pfizer, for instance, but that is where we are with respect to the allocations and the shipments arriving in the county. You'll note in that middle table at the top that the number of providers registered in alert has jumped up to 53, and the number of providers coming in with having received a vaccine has now increased to 21. We have been through our call center. Of course, the volume of calls come inbound, as you can imagine, have been around specific where, this is my situation, how can I get vaccine? We have built a form that our call center staff have been using to log the calls coming in. So we've heard from 191 distinct organizations representing 2,982 people, which we have logged to specific places in the allocation. We are launching this web form later today on the vaccine website that will enable us to continue to collect information. We recognize, and as Steve iterated, much of the early focus on vaccination, particularly within the healthcare community, but also for law enforcement and first responders, has happened through kind of known channels. It's easy for Peace Health or for McKinsey Willamette to identify their staff and to then schedule them for vaccinations. It's easier even for them to kind of begin to identify some of the larger practices in town and understand, reach out through normal relationships and begin to bring them into their process as well. There's a number of smaller individuals, and you'll recall that the definition of healthcare professionals is fairly expansive, including everything from chiropractic to dentistry to occupational therapy, pharmacy, psychology. Many of those are examples of what are likely to be fairly small practices. And as is the case within each of the groups across the entirety of this vaccine rollout, where we are identifying those that are not necessarily well connected to existing systems, we're very keen to capture those data so that we are able to fulfill our mission of minding the gaps. So as you see the allocations and within, and Steve hit this point previously, but within alert, we're reporting 99,627 vaccinations, people vaccinated across the entire state. We're showing 7,295 within Lane County. Of that, 115 people have received both of their doses. So 77,180 have received about 1,000 of their doses. Our best, in rough numbers, we're looking at about 40,000 people in phase 1A. Of that group, so that includes healthcare workers, that includes first responders. Of that group, about 600,000 are estimated in the long-term care facilities, both staff and residents. And specifically, those are being addressed through a federal contract with a number of pharmacy chains who are going out to each of those facilities. So within phase 1A, as it's currently divided, we have 34,000 in rough numbers is kind of the N. So if you look at where we are, I'm sorry?
Sorry to cut you off. You said 600,000. I think you meant to say I imagine 600 for long-term care. Sorry,
6,000, yes.
6,000.
Yes. Thank you for keeping me honest. 6,000. That would be a large aberration. So 6,000 individuals as residents and staff for our long-term care facilities. If we're looking at this number, 7,000 over 34,000, that's what we know has been administered. And we know there are additional doses administered that have yet to be inputted into the alert system. We can see these lags in real time. In fact, I checked the Marion County data this morning, and I see no evidence of a mass event that happened there over the weekend, showing up in the Marion County numbers. Okay. So, commissioners, I want to kind of brief you on what we have operationalized thus far. And our focus has remained largely within the phase 1A groups and supporting the group 1, of course, and that has been the primary focus, and that has been accomplished through closed points of distribution or pods within the hospitals. So that has been ongoing for the 3 weeks that vaccine has been shipping. And we now, because the Pfizer dose is a 21-day turnaround and our hospitals have largely received Pfizer, they are now beginning their second doses in mass this week. So I mentioned that the pharmacy chains are providing vaccine to long-term care facility. We would love to get more data on where they are in their process, but as we are in touch with them, they have continued to tell us that they would have to hand count. They don't seem to have a system in place. So we're fairly certain that they're not uploading to alert in a timely fashion. And we have concerns about that. McKinsey Willamette and Peace Health have begun to open as limited points of distribution for other local providers, and that begins this week. Dr. Ledke convened the hospitals last week at their request to begin to have a conversation about how they would apply ethical principles from the healthcare world to the actual prioritization of individuals from other phase 1A groups coming into their limited pods. And then we here in Lane County Public Health seeded 3 limited points of distribution for phase 1A providers. So we provided 220 doses to Eugene Pediatrics, to Oregon Medical Group, and to Whitebird last week to enable them to inoculate their staff. Each of those organizations has volunteered their time, their staff at their cost in their facilities to stand up weekend clinics that will enable us to essentially send them cues of folk to be vaccinated as we move through this process. And then Eugene Springfield Fire has taken the lead for ensuring vaccination for many of the rural fire districts, all of the police departments, from McKenzie Bridge to Florence and points, all other points in Wayne County. And then we have taken the responsibility for Wayne County Sheriff's Office and others. In addition, Wayne County Public Health allocated doses last week to our providers within our community health centers and to other public health staff, all of which is to kind of implement a tried and true mass vaccination strategy of vaccinating the vaccinators. So we accomplished 192 vaccinations last week, and we have 120 underway even as we speak. So finally, I want to present maybe a visual graphic, very specifically put forward by the CDC to kind of talk about what this process would likely look like. And we find ourselves, I would say, at the very beginning of the upward tick here in the lower left of the oval. We're still in a moment of projected shortage of vaccinations. The demand far outstrips the supply that is available to us. We are working through a number of challenges with respect to really understanding clarity and guidance from OHA as we move through this process. But we are already implementing our standing plans for moving further up this curve as the supply ramps up, and our ability to engage specifically in mass vaccination events. So one of the particular strategies that was effective both in the H1N1 event in 2009 as well as the meningitis outbreak is a technique, mass vaccination or mass vax. So these can be either walk through or drive through. We are planning on drive through events as we get to sufficient levels. Steve shared the estimates in the lessons learned from H1N1 that we can administer with a 12-person team of individuals administering vaccine, that we could move through 1,600 individuals a day with that, provided that we have that amount of doses to administer, of moving that process through. We are partnered with the University of Oregon currently in terms of providing support to us from a logistics perspective. Vicki Strand from the athletics department has been detailed to their emergency management team, and her day job is managing logistics for the athletics department. So everything from Autzen game day to the Olympic trials. We have worked through the process with her, and we essentially have the ability to make a decision, a go, no go on a Tuesday, and have an event up and ready by the weekend. We are very actively looking at multiple sites around the county. To date, we have vetted 3 in depth. That is Autzen, the Lane Event Center, and Lane Community College for our ability to stand up. Our team working with hers has, are using Google Maps with the satellite view and zooming right in and diagramming out how they would develop the process flow. We would need additional personnel, obviously, beyond just the folk sticking. We have access to the search and rescue to enable us to manage traffic at a particular event, as well as other Wayne County public health staff who would be available on site to take care of some of the paperwork and data entry. The logistics support that UO is providing is everything from tents to internet access, and of course, freezer capacity on site if in fact we're dealing with Moderna. They, with earlier state support, procured sufficient freezer storage capacity for 400,000 vials, which is currently at temperature and awaiting its payload. I will conclude my slides at this point, commissioners, and just bring you up to speed very quickly on the allocations this week. So Indeed, public health is receiving the doses that we reported, 100. As we dove into the allocation and really began to pull it apart. We noted that 800 doses were going to NOVA urgent care facilities across the county. They registered, and 100 is the minimum delivery size for the Moderna vaccine. The federal government or the state won't break it below that. In the outreach and conversation, because of the quality of the relationships that Dr. Ludke and others here at Wayne County Public Health have fostered over the years, we realized that, and they indicated that they really only needed 150 of those doses in rough numbers, and that they were willing to transfer 650 in rough numbers back to Wayne County to enable us to continue to stand up and feed the distribution processes that we have in hand. We're also coordinating an active conversation throughout the day yesterday with some of the other providers who have received vaccine to understand what their needs are this week and to consider potentially moving some of those doses amongst some of the recipients. I think this goes to the point that OHA, I think the local public health authorities need an opportunity to be able to advise on the weekly allocations. We know our community well, we know what those dose requirements are, and this lack of coordination cost us a day and essentially playing a game of telephone to try to figure out who has doses, do you need it, what can we do? So the team now is in the process of really kind of trying to get a hard number of how many doses we will have in hand when they are delivered, when we can pick them up, and how quickly we can stand up processes. So as Steve indicated, we are working actively today, and we will brief you towards the end of the day or early tomorrow morning on our plans for this weekend with respect to these allocations.
Forgive me, Mr. Adams. I didn't want to interrupt because this information is critical, but I think now the time for us even to ask questions has been taken. Is there anything else before we allow commissioners to ask questions?
Nothing more from me, Chair Bernie. Thank you for the indulgence of time, and my apologies for running long.
You got it, Chair. Excuse me. Old habits die hard. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. So I appreciate all that information, and I look forward to seeing those stats up on our website. I have sent a couple of emails since our last meeting, and they're basically questions that I've received to the public that I'm forwarding on with concerns to you and your department. And I appreciate you replying. One of those, though, is the mass vaccination plan. You didn't necessarily touch on it other than we have one. I requested a copy. I haven't gotten it yet, so I'd still like to see it. And I think a summary of that on our county website would be really good for the public for transparency. They're asking these questions. As we'll probably get, as soon as we end this segment of our meeting, you'll probably get yet more new information that we've never received before because it's just moving that quickly. One of the other stats that I would personally like to see and that I'm being asked by the public is of Lane County Public Health, the vaccines that we're getting, how many are out the door? What is our average time to get them out the door? How many are left to give out of our allocation? This is something that I think we need to put up in Tableau or however you want to do it. The Tableau's been such a wonderful asset as we've been tracking this all along. So I just want to reiterate those points. And I'm sure it will, as it has ever evolved.
Chair Bernie, thank you, Commissioner Buck, and thank you for that communication. It was very helpful. So on the mass vax piece, so the communications team has revamped our vaccine webpage, and we have taken, admittedly, a first pass at really trying to develop a public-friendly walkthrough of our plans. I will certainly follow up as well for your specific request. With respect to our stats, we are looking at a number of different things, and you shared yesterday the dashboard concept from the fire recovery process, which is also a useful template. So we are building some of those, and we very much are very keen to push some of those out. I think the epi curve and some of the other graphics that we've used to communicate with the public on the disease side of the equation, I think have become almost iconic. People see that and understand that, and we need to do the same thing on the vaccine side. With respect to the 1,200 doses received by Wayne County for internal use or for allocation to our various processes, we began the day yesterday with 200 doses available to us to support vaccine events that are happening this week. We will be fully out of vaccine that we have by midweek in order to be able to move forward without this new allocation coming in. So one of the talking points that I noted in the governor's press conference was OHA indicating, essentially that vaccine will flow to those places that can move it. And in the future, kind of moving toward a prioritization process of moving vaccine to places that can get vaccine out in 7 days. I think that's a critical metric.
Mr. Abbs, Chair Buck has been pushing this. I couldn't agree with her more. Do you have an ETA as to when the public might be able to see some of this information?
Some of this information is online already, Chair Bernie. We will be continuing to roll out content this week and next week.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Chair and Commissioner Buck, I just reiterate, we sent this out to commissioners yesterday. If you just, for anyone in the public, can go to lanecounty.or.gov, click on that yellow banner at the top, COVID-19 response, and at the top of that page, there's a graphic icon. It says vaccine update. You click on that, and the vast majority of everything that you're asking for is there. There's a link to the state data system. It's a tableau of all the vaccines that have been administered statewide. You can click on Lane County and see an update on what's happened in terms of vaccinations in Lane County. It shows all of our partners. It talks about the different phases and all of those pieces. So we will continue to provide and update that page and provide all the relevant information. I just ask that, know that these things are moving very quickly, and our team really is focused on coordinating with our partners and making sure that we have the capacity that once for a large, mass vax event or hopefully larger deliveries each week to our community to make sure that we can deliver that. So we will get this information, we'll continue to get it out as it's available to the public. I think that, everything that you're asking for and that the public has asked for is largely available already on that site.
Thank you, Mr. Mokrahajski. Commissioner Farr, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Chair Bernie. And Chair, immediate outgoing Chair Buck, had asked the questions really that I think we all have wanted to ask, and that is how can the public get more information, and how do we update and keep them informed as the dynamics of the situation evolve? And Mr. Adams, you said within 1 hour of making your presentation last week, it had already changed. And I would guess within 1 hour of today's presentation, it will have changed again. So my question then is regarding our website, and I'm on the website right now in front of me, and I look at it on a regular basis. It does seem to be updated pretty regularly in different places. My main response to questions that I receive from people is, I'll answer questions as I can and as I receive answers, but I direct them toward our website, much as you just did with Chair Bernie a second ago, or as Mr. Mokrahajski did with Chair Bernie. Can we have confidence that that website is giving us pretty accurate information on a daily basis at least? That's my first question, Chair Bernie.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Farr, for the question. Indeed, we are literally updating it daily. We had to go on yesterday to indicate that the phone system was down, and if you're calling the call center, call this cell phone number. So the information, the public information officer and his team are doing tremendous work to keep that updated.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Adams. I suspected that to be the answer you were going to give. And also that website gives a lot of links to both federal and state information regarding distribution of vaccine. people have a lot of questions, and they tend to ask people they know who are in government the questions. So I get a lot of questions coming my way, and I have a chance to forward them to people who can answer the questions or to the website. One question that people are asking, before I get to my question, I want to point out that yesterday during our AOC, Association of Oregon Counties meetings, both Chair Burney and Commissioner Bozovic directly approached OHA with a question regarding the 100 doses and the reasons for that, and registered our displeasure with it. Chair Burney also talked about other commissioners speaking with different people in government regarding making certain that the governor's office hears directly from the Board of County Commissioners, and they have. Personally, I spent some time speaking with the Senate President Pro Tem, who has the ear of a few people in Salem, I would understand. And so people are being rattled at the highest levels of government that we can to make certain that that equitable distribution is happening, and that we can answer questions as to why other people are getting vaccine. You know, if we look on Facebook, for instance, I have a friend who lives in California who is she's a parent of a challenged child who is in the education system, and she had received her vaccination yesterday. She's not a healthcare worker, and we're saying that we're catching up with healthcare workers. So people have questions: why do people in California who aren't healthcare workers have vaccinations and we don't? You'll answer that question in due time. But directly, Salem was pretty broadly highlighting the fact that they were able to deliver 400 doses per hour over the weekend. How did they get the doses, and how did they do it? And how can we emulate that? Because people say, if they can do it, why aren't we not doing that? That's about it, Chair Burney, because the other questions really are answered. And Mr. Adams, don't want to put you on the spot. That's a rhetorical question. How did they do it? How can we do it? You know, I understand we're doing the best that we can with the flow of vaccine that we have. Chair Burney, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any other commissioner that would like to? Commissioner Trieger.
Very briefly, first, congratulations on the 1 month mark. As someone who just hit my 1 week mark, I feel your pain. I can't wait to be 1 month in. As Commissioner Farr just commented, I'm sure all my colleagues here, this is the #1 issue that I'm getting inquiries about and comments from constituents and from the community, including last night when I spoke with a mom who's pregnant and anticipating delivery any moment, whose husband is a clinician in an independent healthcare practice and hasn't been able to access a vaccination, and she's very worried for him and her family. So this is great information. I did direct her to the website and have followed up with her again. Your information is always so clear, so useful. I appreciate it so much. And I would just like to ask, please, that when you present slides, anything that you're presenting, it's helpful to me to have them emailed out, because then I can just match them against my scribble notes as I'm responding. I know the information's on the website too, but just it would be really helpful for me for tracking and checking against my own notes to remind myself what got covered which week. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Chair Burney.
Thank you. I would second that, but my reasons are my eyes are so bad I need to blow it up to see it. Commissioner Bozovic, I have not seen your hand. Would you like to say anything? No? Okay. First, Mr. Adams, yes, your month here has provided so much information in a coherent manner to us. I know for every minute you speak, you have 10, you could speak with solid information. Personally, as someone that has supported and defended our state's administration, in this instance, I think that for Lane County to receive an allocation after requesting 2,500 for this week and demonstrating capacity to put those in arms, to receive 100, and to have Marion County, whose population is not that much larger than ours, receive 10,000 is absolutely unacceptable. And I hope that staff and commissioners agree with that statement. And I hope that statement can help you leverage having much more input into what seems like just an incomprehensible deployment schedule. We all have children that need to go to school, businesses that need to open, and we can't do it without those vaccines. Thank you, sir. Are any other comments on that from any other commissioner before we move on? Thank you, Mr. Adams, so much. Okay, we are now on item 6 of our agenda, the consent calendar. I just for us all, a reminder, when commissioners choose, or the public requests a commissioner to choose to take something off of the consent calendar, Diana and her staff would very much like to know that by noon on Monday before our Tuesday meeting, because it impacts staff time. And when an item is taken off, staff will be available for us to discuss that item. Having said that, however, this is the beginning of the consent calendar. Discussion, motion? Commissioner Farr.
Chair Bernie, I move passage of the consent calendar for January 12th, 2021.
Second.
Was that you, Commissioner Krieger? Or Commissioner, sorry about that. It has been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve the consent calendar. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the motion passes unanimously, approval of consent calendar. Bear with me here. Okay, county administration. 8A, report legislative committee update. Mr. Kyler. Or is that incorrect order? I saw the way I looked at you, Steve, the way I saw your face suggested that I forgot something. Yeah, and I did. Number 7, county council announcements. I apologize.
Chair, I'm not seeing Mr. Dingle on the meeting at the moment, so you may want to go to Mr. Kyler. I know is on.
Mr. Chair Bernie?
Yes,
Chair
Diana.
Bernie, this is Diana. We will need to come back to county council announcements, however, because I do know he has some. I will contact him in the meantime.
I kind of figured we'd come back to it. Thanks, Diana. We'll skip that for now. So I was right in my ignorance. Number 8, county administration. 8A, is Mr. Kyler available and prepared for this item?
Good morning, commissioners. I'm here.
Good morning. Please, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to begin just by saying hello to Commissioner Trieger. Congratulations on your position and election. I'm your Intergovernmental Relations Manager, Alex Kyler. I'm here to present to you on an update and a report back from the Legislative Committee, which met on December 10th. There's 2 items that the Legislative Committee is bringing back to the full board. One is an adoption of our first ever bylaws for the committee. And the second is a request for approval of what we call our principles and priorities document. So I think I'll begin with the bylaws because that's something that's required for advisory committees. One, Diana Jones has been very interested in making sure that that bylaws actually gets completed. So we worked on this bylaws, and I will state that the advisory, this legislative committee is a little bit different from some of your other advisory committees. So the legislative committee is made up of 2 commissioners that are appointed annually, and then department directors who are just assumed under the Lane Manual to be a member of the committee. So it's not quite the same entity as a citizen advisory committee. At any rate, we did develop the bylaws that are attached as part of your package. And I think the most notable thing about, well, there's a couple notable things about the legislative committee bylaws. One is that we really try to work through consensus on the committee and defer to the commissioners present to make sure that they're okay with the recommendations we bring forward. I think it would become kind of an awkward situation if we've got a situation, for example, where staff disagrees with a commissioner, the commissioner's sort of position. So we really try to defer to the commissioners who are there. The other thing that I think is very important for the board to know today is that within the bylaws, it does state that at every meeting, the principles and priorities document will be reviewed. This document was really designed to be a very dynamic document. Each time you'll see it, it should have an updated date on it. And as the legislature, both the state legislature and the United States Congress are both highly dynamic organizations. And the county is a highly dynamic organization. So this document really gives us the guidance that we need at any given moment to respond to the things that are coming down the pike. And we've had successes. So there's a lot of things that have to come off the legislative priorities document. And in addition, I would say, because the board changes is the reason that we really want to make sure that we've got that document as updated as possible, because people's perspectives and of course the issues do change. So that's what I'm going to say about the bylaws. Mr. Chair, up to you how you want to handle it. There is a specific motion and an individual order that goes along with the bylaws adoption. I can continue to go right to the principles and priorities document if you'd like, or you can take the vote on the bylaws document right now.
Why don't you go right ahead if you would, Alex, and then we'll have a context for our votes.
Okay. So what I've put into the packet is the proposed principles and priorities document updated January 2021. And in your packet, you'll see that I also did list the highlighted issues. So either document will work in terms of seeing what we added. So I think I'll start with the document. We did update some of the issues related to the Holiday Farm fire, because as you'll recall, commissioners who were present back in March and April when COVID first presented itself, we actually did pull together a legislative committee to adopt a specific set of COVID-related legislative principles. When Holiday Farm Fire struck in September, there was a whole new suite of issues that presented itself to the county, many of which really required legislative changes. And so in the December 10th meeting, we recommended these 7 or 8 new principles related to how we respond to the Holiday Farm Fire. And in fact, there's 2 committees in the legislature this session that are dealing with just fire-related issues. So having this kind of thing is going to be very helpful as the session evolves. We made a few changes, or we're recommending a few changes to the remainder of the existing sort of sections of the principles and priorities document. So you can see there's a couple of clarifications that we make to the public safety section. And I did want to call out that last bullet under public safety. The previous board, at any rate, had received a very compelling presentation from the sheriff's office about the program where they are able to access certain equipment from the federal government. And it seemed important to the sheriff that we go ahead and add a priority to make sure that those kinds of pieces of equipment can remain as the property of Lane County. I think there was some concern that there may be efforts to claw back that equipment. In terms of the health and human services sort of arena of the document, we made a couple of minor changes to that section. I think the big one really is that last one: support efforts to increase Oregon's beer and wine tax. This has been a very challenging issue in the Oregon legislature. It's been debated a lot, and it has not been raised. The beer and wine tax has not been raised in a lot of years. Let's see, I've been doing this work for 12 years. I worked with then Senator Bill Morissette. That was pretty much the last attempt that actually had some legs to try to get the beer and wine tax increased. And this session, the governor has proposed a bill to do that. So I think it's important that that we address it through our legislative principles document. In the public works section, you'll see that we did a new bullet about supporting efforts which transfer the cost of recycling and disposal functions onto product producers. This is an effort that the DEQ is bringing forward, and has been the focus of an interim work group to really try to ensure that that we are pursuing this kind of policy in Oregon. We have some examples of this already. Televisions and computers have are under a product stewardship model. Paint is under a product stewardship model. Tires are kind of under a product stewardship model. The bottle bill is a good example of a product stewardship model. So it's really where you're sort of shifting the costs away from local government and onto those who produce things that are, in particular, may become toxic. So in the landfills. So this is a good policy. It will probably face a kind of an uphill battle in the legislature, but I think it's consistent with the conversations that I've heard the board having. And let's see. Commissioner Burney, this is your priority there under economic development. This is to make sure that the community benefits program really is front and center within our legislative priorities. Now, finally, the last section is really where we put what I call our priorities, and these are specific bills that the county would go and pursue as a priority and take the lead on lobbying during the session. You'll see the first bullet has to do with we are very much trying to mitigate the risk that the county mental health program is exposed to through a relatively new procedure developed by the legislature called community restoration. And this is kind of an alternative to sending folks to the state hospital who are unable to aid and assist in their own defense. And these are defendants, they're people who've been charged with a crime, but due to their either behavioral or mental health situation, they're really not functioning very well and cannot understand what's happening in the courtroom. And so it's a procedure, and we just happen to be one of what's called a high sending county. We have a lot of these defendants that in the past have gone to the Oregon State Hospital. Now more and more are being ordered into the community. And we unfortunately have a lot of risk when that happens. And you'll hear more about that, I think, today in exec session. We've got a couple other priorities there. One is Measure 110. Measure 110, which essentially minimized or changed from a crime to a violation, drug possession, certain drug possession laws, has some language in it that suggests that there would be a cost savings from local arrests. And we don't know how that will work. And so that measure will need some work during the legislature, and kind of important for us to pay attention to that work. And then finally, we are tracking on how opioid litigation revenue, well, it was really a settlement agreement for a nationwide class action lawsuit regarding the manufacturing of opioids. And we're trying to make sure that when those settlement talks are finalized, that counties actually do receive some of those dollars. And so depending on how those talks go, we may need to try to get a bill introduced. So that was the gist of the December 10th meeting. We will be meeting regularly, probably monthly, during the legislative session. And as you know, they convened yesterday up in Salem, and there's already a couple hundred bills to look at. This document really helps me and the remainder of the staff to respond to these kinds of issues, rather than how we used to handle things, which was to come to the board with every single measure and try to get a position. So this document, I think, streamlines the work of the board and certainly of staff. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kyler. This is a moment, I noticed Commissioner Farr's hand up. This is a moment where there can be some questions, but also, board, please know that we'll then entertain the different orders that we have in front of us, and there will be discussion on each one of those also. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I just wanted to point out that Mr. Kyler has been working as our government affairs liaison for many years. And I say this quite often, but I'll say it in the presence of a different company today, that Mr. Kyler is one of the most highly regarded lobbyists in the building in Salem, that he is able to get into places that other lobbyists can't get. And that I really just wanted to point out that his work is once again highly respected throughout the Capitol building. Mr. Kyler, thank you for all of that work. I just had a question for you. You need 2 motions today, is that correct? And I guess those are before us. I'll wait for other questions before we look for motions. Thank you, Chair Bernie.
Congratulations, Mr. Kyler. No one's going to call for your removal, it doesn't sound like. Commissioner Buck.
I just wanted to appreciate the work that the legislative committee did with Mr. Kyler. I'm very supportive of the updates, and I want to highlight one in particular because we did have AOC Day yesterday, and I was in the Transportation Committee meeting, and they brought up that there is a variety of legislative bills coming in the session regarding product stewardship and recycling, which I'm very supportive of. They're, in my opinion, very nominal, basic steps moving in the right direction towards product stewardship. So I appreciate that addition in particular, although very supportive of all the changes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. First, I just want to check a quick Scribner's error. In the legislative principles, in the one that references the second priority bills, efforts to modify Measure 110, it talks about section of Measure 100. Is that supposed to be 110?
Chair Bernie and Commissioner Bozievich, thank you for catching that. It is, and if I could take this opportunity, I really thought I had this right, but you'll see at the very top of the document, if you could make a note in whatever motion you do, that should be January 2021. Sorry.
In general, many of these principles are carryovers that I've supported in the past. Great, I'm competing with my lawn service right now. I hope you guys can't hear that. maybe it'd be best to go to another commissioner first and come back to me and let them get away from my window.
I'm enjoying the sound of music, Commissioner. Does another commissioner like to speak at this point? Well, Jay, it looks like if you're going to talk, it's going to be now.
Okay. I have a couple items I want to ask for some clarity and questioning on. Under the Holiday Farm fire things, the last bullet point is to support efforts to build back better. That's not defined. And of course, that terminology was actually used in justifying the vote on the floodplain ordinance last month on December 15th, that we were going to require people to build back better, which was code for we're going to require people to go through additional time and permit steps, and we're also going to require compensatory storage, which may not benefit floodplain. So, I have a real problem with that terminology unless it's defined to be put into our legislative concepts. Build back better doesn't really define as anything. So I just want to place that out there. Oh my God. I wonder if he's walking away. I have a little bit of a question under the H&HS about the ensure marijuana tax revenues are allocated for drug treatment prevention.
Okay.
This is somewhat embarrassing because it usually is not right when I'm talking that these guys come around.
Are there any of your points that could be made after one of the motions, Commissioner? Would that help you?
I mean, I'm happy to address at least those first two that Commissioner Bozievich has brought up.
Please do, Alex. Thank you.
Okay. So Chair Barney and Commissioner Bozievich, the Build Back Better, I mean, I'm happy to, I think the committee would be happy to take a second look at that if you'd like. I think the gist of it is that, for example, you're going to have a presentation coming up on the 26th from the University of Oregon about their efforts to help with the communications infrastructure upriver. And you'll probably hear things like, well, we are hanging fiber on telephone poles upriver. And that all burned up during. So, it's going to be difficult and more expensive to underground that wire or that fiber. But it may be particularly worthwhile for us to talk to do that work. And I think the question needs to be asked about, we are talking about fire-prone areas. And so how do we work on really long-term resiliency? So there may be better ways to describe it. And I apologize if that was a trigger on the previous discussion about the streamside restoration. With respect to the marijuana tax revenues, Measure 110 does sort of a major reform to marijuana tax revenues. And so that's the other piece of Measure 110 that may need some work. What Measure 110 does is essentially says that those who used to receive marijuana tax revenue will only receive, I believe, $12 million. And after that, everything on top of that will go into Measure 110. And we believe that, in particular, school districts will have something to say about that kind of mechanism. I did see the other day that marijuana revenue in Oregon has reached a new record high. So it's not a huge part of the state budget, but it is significant for those who do receive the tax right now. And Measure 110 does make a major change to how that tax is allocated.
Commissioners, I would just like to state we have 15 minutes before we need to move through dealing with these two items. Are you through, Commissioner Bozievich, or no?
Thank you. I finally did get the attention of my guy and sent him away from the window. The marijuana tax issue for me somewhat was, prior we were fighting to try and get our real share of that. And part of it was for enforcement issues in land management and in the sheriff's office. So not just purely for drug treatment prevention. So that's what I was a little bit concerned about, saying that's all we want it allocated for. Also, we had some efforts to revise the state law around the ability to tax, this county to be able to tax retail receipts inside cities, or have some share of that we worked on in the past, because we are getting almost nothing compared to cities when it comes to local retail tax, because all the clinics are inside cities and we get no share of that retail tax. So that, I just want to make that clear. I'm also concerned about just a blanket effort to increase the beer and wine tax unless it has dedication back to counties. And that was what we were fighting for prior to that. If we were going to increase it, it's going to come back to counties for everything from DUI enforcement to treatment and prevention. And that's not kind of in that sentence. So that was one of my concerns about this blanket increase the taxes. If it's just going into the state coffers for them to spend willy-nilly, I'm not so supportive of that. I'm a little bit concerned about incentivizing anything through the government. It usually tends to be borne by our low income and folks whenever we incentivize something, because it's usually either by some kind of penalty on the price of whatever we're trying to disincentivize, or taxing something to provide the funding necessary to do the incentivizations. So as you desire incentivizing free market activity through government action, just remember it usually raises the price of something that has disproportionate impact on low income and communities of color. So I have a concern about including that in this document. And I'll leave it there.
Okay. And just to clarify, Chair Byrne and Commissioner Bozievich, the incentivized one you're referring to under Public Works about incentivizing fleets to transition to a cleaner fuel?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Trieger.
Yeah, one quick clarifying question, Mr. Carlo. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Chair Byrne. You mentioned the $12 million cap. Do we have any understanding or estimate of what amount will be generated above that cap? And then I have one other question unrelated.
Chair Byrne and Commissioner Trieger, I could get you that information. I don't have it off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that.
That's fine, thank you.
I guess I can say something. I believe last year, marijuana tax was somewhere in the neighborhood of $66 million a year, seems to stick in my head. Of course, that's a dynamic number in and of itself.
Great.
But so capping it at a fifth of that.
Thank you. And my other, not a question so much as a comment to Commissioner Bozievich's comments. I appreciate the concern and the awareness that there are often, in fact, almost always, disparate impacts and therefore disparate outcomes, particularly for lower income communities. But I think it's a much more subtler and deeper conversation that I'm happy to have sometime, which is it is often lower income folks and communities of color that are disproportionately targeted and marketed to for these harmful products that then further poor health outcomes. And so we really need to look at the full picture if we're going to use that as a barometer and a concern So I'll just put that out there that I am happy to and looking forward to more comments where we ensure generally and especially per our equity work, which we'll hear more about tomorrow, that we're always cognizant of those disparate impacts and those disparate outcomes, and we're not furthering any detrimental impacts and harms to communities of color and lower income people in our community that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. You know, we only have a few minutes. Every commissioner has spoken. Commissioner Farr, your hand is up. I haven't spoken. If you could make it.
I was just going to ask if you're ready for some motions, Chair Bernie, but if you'd like to speak before the motions, I'll.
No, I would, but you know what? I'm learning as chair. Tough luck if I would. We're in a time constraint now. So please, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Then, Mr. Carlin, we have two motions to adopt via board order. We don't have board order numbers on these yet. Is that correct?
I believe we do.
We do. Then I am not seeing the board order numbers.
On the main agenda.
They're on the main agenda. They're order 21-01-12-04 and -05.
Thank you. Then I first move to move passage of 21-01-12-04.
Second.
It has been, I'm sorry,
That's fine.
it's been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Order 21-01-12-04, the matter of adopting recommendations of the Lane County Legislative Committee. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Buck.
I just want to add, if the maker of the motion agrees, to include the two Scribner's error changes in that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Yes, I would like to include that.
With the inclusion of the Scribner errors that we will always hear from by Commissioner Bozovich. Thank you.
We really ought to rename them Kyler errors, but.
That works for me. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Bozovich.
I just want to note that I'll be voting against this because it does include some of those issues that I raised concerns about. 90% of this I agree with, but I can't vote for it while it still includes those concerns.
Understood, sir. And well, is there further discussion on this?
Chair, but I'm going to make a note, if I may. When I was first appointed to the Eugene City Council to replace Bobby Green, we had a legislative liaison. And our first discussion of the legislative committee meetings, one councilor, Councilor Bowles, wanted to discuss every single bill in detail, and it took hours. I'm glad we're not in that position with this Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you, sir. Before we vote, I'm just going to say one thing, and hopefully it's clarification. I have come to learn that you know what product stewardship means? Product stewardship means that the companies that are manufacturing and selling items have to include in the cost of production items that heretofore have not been, which includes the cost of them recycling or dealing with what they have contributed. I just wanted to share that one item because for me, it's very edifying. For you, it's probably common sense. Okay, it has been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Buck. Order 21-01-12-04. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Nay.
So for the record, this item has been approved. 4 commissioners in the affirmative and Commissioner Bozovich in the negative.
Pardon me, Chair Bernie.
Yeah, Commissioner Trieger, did I do something wrong?
No, not at all. I did. I realized I hadn't unmuted for the vote. I raised my hand and I said aye, but I hadn't unmuted. So I just wanted to, for the record, confirm my aye vote. Thank you.
You mean we would have had an inaudible recording of your vote? Okay, no problem at all. Thank you. And is there another motion on the floor? Commissioner Farr.
Chair Bernie, I move passage of order 21-01-12-05 in the matter of adopting recommendations of the Lane County Legislative Committee with respect to the committee's bylaws.
Is there a second? It has been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Order 21-01-12-05 in the matter of adopting recommendations of the Lane County Legislative Committee with respect to committee's bylaws. Is there discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. And this item is passed unanimously. Thank you. At this point, unless someone from the staff yells at me not to, we are going to go back to item 7, which we had to skip. Now I believe I see Mr. Dingle with us, County Council announcements. Mr. Dingle. We can't hear you, sir. We see your mouth moving.
There we go. Now can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. It was indicating that it indicated that I was unmuted, but it wasn't apparently working. Chair, the first thing I was going to ask you is, I know you kept referring to the time. Do you want me to go ahead? It's going to be a little longer than usual. I didn't know if you wanted to go to the, you kept doing a countdown time-wise.
Well, we have an executive session after this, Mr. Dingle. I was told that this wouldn't take too long.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead then. The first announcement that I have is that we have, after quite a long process, successfully filled the paralegal position with a very talented candidate from out of state who moved here, Morgan Corbett. She will be starting next Tuesday. She'll be working in the office personally while she's being trained, just because that's more efficient. And then she'll be working probably a little bit more remotely. So if you start seeing her name on emails coming to you about certain things, that's who she is. The second thing that I wanted to address is the situation involving the vote for vice chair. I know Commissioner Bozevich and Commissioner Farr are aware of this, perhaps the other commissioners aren't, but the board in its governance and rules of decorum has stated that it will not strictly follow Robert's Rules of Order. So in that situation last week, what I heard was that the commissioner, or Chair Bernie, had recognized a second for Commissioner Farr. No one had objected, and so the election could proceed. There was a question about the election. I did not have my Robert's Rules of Order with me because, again, I'm working at 2 different places and I did not bring it. I was at the office last week, not in my home, where I do have my Robert's Rules of Order. But in any event, I did go back and look, and I was correct about the way that the vote should proceed. So if the board wishes to change the general process and move to to a strict Robert's Rules of Order, that's certainly something that the board can do. It would not, I mean, technically, some of these motions didn't even require seconds and those sorts of things. But again, if that's the expectation or desire of the board, we could certainly do that. I would recommend that if we did that, that we would have some sort of work session / training session on it so that everyone is familiar with, because I know some people, obviously Commissioner Bozevich is more familiar with the rules than someone else. And I believe I've responded to Commissioner Trigger's concern. I thought I'd already done that, but I apologize if it wasn't crystal clear. And finally, I just want to put this on the board's radar. You know that on the 26th of this month that you're scheduled to hear a presentation from the sheriff on a Mohawk public safety district or police services district. There will be, we'll be making a brief presentation tomorrow on the first step of that, which is simply required by the statutes, which is an order of formation and setting a formal hearing time for you to vote down the road. But the sheriff is scheduled, and I think anticipating that the board would want this, I know he does, 2 other opportunities for the public to provide input and comment prior to that time, so that there's a lot of opportunity for community engagement. And that's all I have, unless there's a specific question.
Thank you, Council. Are there questions for Mr. Dingle? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you. I just want to address the point regarding Robert's Rules of Order. I don't feel like there is any big pressure to be necessarily more strict in Robert's Rules of Order. Specifically, I would like to see you prepared at meetings should these things arise. You're unprepared. These were elementary questions. You didn't need to dig out your Robert's Rules of Order. We are not parliamentarians. We are county commissioners. Even if we did parliamentarian procedures in high school, this is really why we employ county council. And just to be able to support our chair when he's trying to make these motions is absolutely critical to having and facilitating quick and efficient meetings. That's my particular point, not necessarily that we need any more strict guidelines in how we conduct a meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I just want to restate, but for a different reason, my comments this morning. My concerns were not about the outcome of the vote. My concerns are not calling into question the will of this board. And I certainly am not in any way operating that would indicate that. In addition to the at least one email I'm aware of that we all received from a community member with concern about the procedural, I have received several other inquiries from members of the community asking about our process and procedural for critical votes. And my concern in bringing this forward is I don't want to create unnecessary vulnerabilities or liabilities for us as a board. If we call the procedurals of one vote into question, it opens us up for calling any number of others into question. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I want to ensure all of our votes have verifiable integrity by us as board members and by members of the community who may go back and watch things later or be watching in real time. And so I would like to request for another time that this meeting has clearly proceeded more clearly in that way, but that we perhaps come to some very specific understandings in this virtual environment in how we're going to conduct our votes to ensure that we don't have these kinds of errors. I'm not saying it was an intentional one or anyone was trying to do anything nefarious. I'm simply stating it's really important to have verifiable integrity of all of our procedural votes. Thank you.
No matter how quickly I'm attempting unsuccessfully to move this forward, I do believe that I saw, is it Commissioner Bozovich? Did I see your hand up?
Thank you. I just want to say that because we haven't formally adopted rules of order, the running of the meetings has been left to the discretion of the chair to a great degree. And because of that, our county council, you're putting him in a very difficult spot when you're asking him to tell the chair how to run the meeting. What I will say is, I do have that experience as a parliamentarian. Technically, nominations from the floor don't even require a second. And beyond that, the chair can determine whether there was a second made. And the only way to change that is for somebody that's a member of the body to object to a point of order and say, I don't believe there was a second made, if we were following Robert's rules. I think, unless we're going to adopt a formal set of rules of order, we have to be careful about asking county council to determine what the chair's discretion is. It's really at the chair's discretion. So I just want to bring that up. The only thing I brought up was the fact that we weren't going to run the election correctly and have the two candidates be voted on at the same time. Instead, we're going to run this one motion, then another, which wasn't the correct procedure for how an election should be run. That was all I was trying to bring up. So I hope that I'm not trying to get us to Robert's rules, because I could tie us up in knots with Robert's rules for hours. Motions to set a time to adjourn and various things that are high priorities. It would be a bad thing for us to go there. I like the fact that we have fairly informal meetings. The chair has a lot of discretion. And if any member of this body feels like the chair isn't exercising that correctly, make a point of order, bring it up, and the body can decide what the correct procedure should be at that time. I think you're placing our county council in a very difficult position to overrule our chair.
And I would say if Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, to your point, I've spoken with Ms. Jones. Part of the job of the vice chair, Ms. Jones, and myself is to try and be more diligent and for her benefit. And you'll recall, well, you won't, Commissioner Trieger, because you weren't here. This has happened a lot in this virtual world where Diana's had to go back and check with things because things weren't recorded or whatever, or it wasn't clear who did what. So we will try to be very diligent when these motions are made for one of those three people, if the chair doesn't say it, to move in and state who made the motion, who seconded it, those sorts of things. Just so there's an audible record.
I really want to close this, but yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Very briefly, I appreciate that, Mr. Dingle. And again, I'm not bringing this up to try to bring changes to our board and how we do business. I'm concerned about the optics and what community members are seeing as procedurals. And so that is my concern, to not open us up to vulnerabilities or liabilities from a community perspective. Thank you.
I want to assure this board that was the first moment of my chair, and I will do my best also not to contribute to any confusion. With everyone's permission, Mr. Dingle, are you through?
Yes, I am. Yes, Chair.
With everybody's permission, we have still so much work to do today. Diane, it's time, I believe, to move into executive session. And if that is the case, Diana, could you please move us into the executive session?
Yes. At this time, the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660(2)E, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. The board reserves the right to come back out into public session should the need arise.
Okay, let's reconvene in executive session, Diana. At this point, we have announcements, I believe. Mr. Manel.
Can I just confirm, Metro, are we live? Thank you.
I think you may want to read the item, Chair.
Yeah, I'm going to the agenda. Okay.
This is Pat.
The Board of Commissioners has now reconvened in regular session. We are on item 10A, order 21-01-12-16 in the matter of accepting Oregon Community Foundation funding. And we have with us Mr. Mokraheisky, Mr. Manella, and Mr. Kincaid.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just make a couple brief comments and then turn over to Steve Manila. This is the item in front of you is really an exciting opportunity for Lane County to once again leverage state and federal funds to meet both the immediate needs and long-term needs and goals of our community. As the board recalls, back in April, Lane County closed on and moved very quickly to utilize existing resources within our organization, which we then were able to seek reimbursement from the federal government through the CARES Act for the acquisition of 100 River Avenue that we're using as a COVID recovery center for unhoused individuals. And our goal is to, in the long term, transition that into a shelter and navigation center for unhoused individuals. I bring that example to you because very similarly, we have been aggressive under the direction and prioritization of the board to look at other available properties in the community that we could acquire. As such, we have participated in this Project Turnkey initiative that the state of Oregon has developed and have moved aggressively through that process. And thanks to the support and advocacy and work of the Board of Commissioners and the great work of our staff, have done really quick work and are moving into the due diligence phase of this effort. So today we have an item here in front of you to provide an update and ask for the board's authorization to delegate authority to continue to move forward in that due diligence process. We will bring back to you updates as we progress. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Manila, our Human Services Division Manager, who's done a lot of work on this, and his staff is as well as Mr. Kincaid, who's with us, management analyst who was actively involved in the 100 River Avenue and other property acquisition projects. Steve?
Chair Bernie, County Board, it's my pleasure to bring this item forward to you this morning. As Steve mentioned, we are very honored and excited that the Oregon Community Foundation accepted our application for Project Turnkey after the Legislative Emergency Board made available $30 million for wildfire victims statewide. So Lane County is one of the finalists, and if we're successful, the Oregon Community Foundation will be funding this project. We're currently in the due diligence process for the real estate transaction. We have an agreement that we need to enter into with the State of Oregon Department of Human Services that will pay for the moteling of the wildfire victim guests. We're also looking forward to entering into an agreement with Homes for Good to operate the facility. Additionally, I want to give thanks to some of the Lane County staff, namely folks that are working with the wildfire EOC, Laurel O'Rourke in particular, in that she contributed to this grant application. And it is through the work that she is doing and Lucy Zimmerelli from Health and Human Services in working with local folks from the Oregon Department of Human Services in the MAST to provide services and to help folks that have lost their homes and have been in motels for a number of months. So now I'll turn it over to Jeff Kincaid, who will give you an update of where we are in the process of acquisition.
Good afternoon, Chair Bernie, Commissioners. This is for the purchase of 599 East Broadway in Eugene. It's an approximately a little less than a half-acre lot with a 26,550 square foot hotel with approximately 50 units, as well as included in that is about a 3,000 square foot fourth floor. This was built in 2008, so there's not as many significant issues as you might expect with an older property, so it's in good shape, which we're hoping to be able to put it to use relatively quickly. We're currently going through the due diligence, as Steve mentioned, which includes everything from bed bug inspection to full on property inspection and appraisal. So we're really not leaving any stone unturned, even though we're acting really quickly on this. I want to highlight one of the benefits of Project Turnkey and working with OCF has been the due diligence is coming at no cost to Lane County. So we work with OCF in order to get pre-approval for the inspections and all the things that we're hoping to do. And then once we have that pre-approval, OCF is paying for it from those Project Turnkey funds. So while we're moving forward quickly and trying to get the purchase price covered, we're also ensuring that the due diligence expenses are covered as well. I also want to mention, given the type of funding and the proposed use, there will be a deed restriction on the property, which will be to use it in the short term to house wildfire displaced residents, and in the long term to be permanent housing. So the intent being to convert it to permanent supportive housing in the future. Myself, Steve Manella, and Assistant County Counsel Jim Chaney have been working to ensure that that language is amenable to us, to ensure that we don't tie our hands too much, but we want to really put it forward for that use. So there are some contingencies that we have to satisfy prior to the purchase being complete. The big two, outside of general inspections and all that, is financing. So one is the OCF giving us a grant to purchase the property, and the second is board approval and acceptance of that grant. So today we are here to get the board approval and delegate authority to the county administrator so we can move forward on this purchase. The due diligence period is currently scheduled to end on February 12th, with closing no later than February 26th. If we're able to get inspections and everything done before then, we could move more quickly with having this board approval already. And the intent is for the county administrator to come back and be able to provide you updates on what is happening. It gives us the authority to be able to negotiate should anything arise, and then execute the agreement if the funding is there. So that is the staff presentation. I will pass it back to Chair Bernie for any board questions. Thank you.
Commissioners, comments, questions, discussion? Commissioner Buck.
As we've spoken about this in exec session, and these folks that will be housed in this facility are from the Holiday Farm fire area in my district, it would be my pleasure to move approval of Order 21-01-12-06 as presented.
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Farr to approve Order 21-01-12-06 in the matter of accepting Oregon Community Foundation funding, if approved, to purchase real property for temporary housing for wildfire displaced residents, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute documents necessary to accept the funding and complete the property transaction. Discussion. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I have a couple of questions, and Mr. Manila, if some of them should be punted to a later session because they may not be directly to the motion, that's completely fine with me. But one that is do we have a timeline for when we'll be notified about the OCF funding? Is part one.
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, yes, we will be notified based upon completion of the due diligence process and their acceptance. That will close out phase 2 and allow them to enter into phase 3 with the award.
Thank you. My other question, pardon me, is, and after this, there's just one more, and they're both brief, I promise, is do we have a sense of the timeline to maximum capacity occupancy once it is approved, whatever renovations and so on needs to happen before people can actually start living there?
Commissioner Trieger, we are hopeful that we will be, Homes for Good will be operating the facility sometime in the spring. We don't have a date certain, but we will apprise the board of the timeline. We're wanting to make sure that we're able to transition folks from their current lodging into the facility and to have all the necessary services available. One of the good things about this facility is that it's a modern facility, and it will probably not require any renovation for occupancy. The renovation that will occur at the point that we transition it from wildfire use to permanent supportive housing.
Thank you. And finally, and that's a perfect segue to my final question / comment, which is, do we have a sense that opportunity of that transition period? Is there anything that we will be bound to that says it has to be vacated of fire evacuees before general population from our unhoused community can start taking occupancy? Or what is that transition plan from populations, I guess is my question. Thank you.
Commissioner Trieger, we don't have a date certain. The funding for the operation is approved by the legislature through the end of the biennium. There will be efforts to continue for budgeting in the new biennium. We will continue to operate it for this purpose as long as the state of Oregon has funding available. State of Oregon hopes to deem funding from FEMA. Otherwise, they'll end up having to use state general funds. As the state of Oregon closes out the wildfire piece, then it's likely that at that point, we'll have a plan along the way with notice to transition folks who are still in the facility. And we still have a lot of planning to do around the conversion of the facility and whether or not we can do that while we have partial occupancy.
Understood. Thank you very much. And just to echo, as Commissioner Buck mentioned in executive session when we talked about who is being served by this remarkable opportunity, that I'm very excited to support fire evacuees from her district. But as the commissioner in whose district the property exists, I just want to make a note for anyone from the public who might be watching this today or in the future that I'm fully supportive of the long-term intended use of this. I know that issues around housing our unhoused neighbors are top of mind for many folks in my district, but I also know, as many of you do, that while the vast majority of our community supports us doing everything we can to get folks off the street, there often are people with some concerns. And so I just want to offer again to anyone watching that I'm happy to talk about those and the impacts they may have on the surrounding businesses and other residents. Thank you.
Other comments? Are there any other comments by Commissioners Bozovich or Farr before I call on Commissioner Buck? No. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank our legislators that made this funding available to our community. It is so desperately needed in our area, and that is the source of the funding ultimately for this new opportunity. So I give them my biggest thanks.
Mr. Mokrahitsky, let's just do some numbers here. What would this with cost be for this?
What do you mean? What the purchase price is?
That is correct. Purchase price.
I believe, Jeff, you want to help me? I think it's, do we say 5.5?
Yes, $5.5 million.
5.5 million.
That equals about $100,000 per unit. Do you know what the usual cost per unit is if we were building?
Commissioner Berney, you can't really compare the MLK Commons, but it's closer to 225 or 250 per unit for a tax credit built project. And affordable housing, the tax credit process adds some cost to building affordable housing.
So we're taking advantage of an opportunity. We're getting it at far less than it would cost to construct, given all the requirements. We aren't having to take the time to construct. And how many county dollars are being used to purchase this?
Outside of staff time, there's no county dollars. Yep.
Thank you. I think it's important that the public is aware of all of this. Thank you very much. And Mr. Mokerheisey, could you tell us again how this opportunity became available?
Oh, gosh. Several folks were involved. Commissioner Berney, you had conversations. We had actually had conversations with the board before we became aware of this specific property. After we had acquired the 100 River Avenue site, we started talking about really the need to if we could acquire a hotel or a motel. We know that the lodging industry is struggling during COVID. We also know that it's something that Salt Lake City did around the Olympics, when they held the Olympics, to acquire those types of older facilities and renovate them into shelters and permanent supportive housing. So we had that idea in mind. We really, were aggressively looking at sites and trying to find places that just could not find the right fit. And thankfully, because a number of conversations occurred, we were able to pull together through the Harbor of Hope organization, which is based in Portland, OCF and the state funding that had come forward, and our local network of contacts, including Commissioner Berney and others on staff, were able to identify this property. So it was sort of like everything came together. I should say everything has so far come together. And I also just want to credit, and I think it is an opportunity to again reiterate why organizationally, we have a bias towards action, and we're really leaning into, a little bit of risk taking here and there. And I think the acquisition of 100 River Avenue was a little bit of risk taking. Our efforts on this one have been, but big things, really good, transformative big things happen when we allow for a little bit of that risk taking and possibility of failure to really move aggressively towards something that is gets us closer to achieving the priorities and goals that the Board of Commissioners has established. So team effort with a lot of key people really rolling up their sleeves.
Absolutely. I was going to say that too. Team effort, big deal. Other discussion before we have a vote on the motion on the floor. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of Order 21-01-12-06 that has been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Farr, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It is unanimous. Congratulations. And at this point, good luck, staff. Hope you get it. Make it happen. At this point, this board will be on recess and reconvene at 1:30. Thank you.